from the heart of the city too busy to hate. A progressive voice making too much sense for corporate media's comfort. This is The Ron Show, where we the people come first. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Hi, and thank you for listening. Whether it's weekdays, 8 a.m., 4 p.m. on Georgia Now, 11 p.m. Progressive Voice via TuneIn or you podcast. Let's see. We're going to sort of navigate a good bit. In fact, this op-ed that I'm going to start with from Bill Torpy at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution really sort of helps frame the conversation that I've been sort of wanting to have for a little bit. There's been a lot of talk, and we've seen here at the state level some rampant ignorance when it comes to Islam, Islamophobia, Sharia law. The word obnoxious does come to mind because it's in the headline of this op-ed, but it is rather obnoxious. It's also a bit hypocritical for conservative pundits, GOP politicians to, on the one hand, use phobias like that as a crutch as long as I can remember. I've been on this planet 52 years, and phobias are in the DNA of conservative punditry and, whether they want to admit it or not, the GOP. But the right has latched on to playing the victim card, the victimhood complex, so much of late. This push against DEI, that is akin to them howling about how unfair it is to be a, what does it say here? A straight white male. Huh. That's weird. That's new. But that was, a lot of the pushback on DEI. Then there was, or has been, a lot of conversation, especially in the 2024 election cycle, about the bigotry against Judaism. But they employ a similar anti-religious bigotry against Islam as well, and cherry pick from the Quran, and don't like when the cherry picking is done from the Bible. There's also a bit of a political element to this, and how this use of Islamophobia can do what it can to divide Democrats. That's sort of what Bill Torpy goes into here in his op-ed in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The headline: The Obnoxious GOP Sharia Law Ad and Ensuing Democrat Division. He writes, Nabila Islam Parks, an ambitious young progressive politician, was looking for a way out of the state Senate, a place so divisive and hostile it sometimes seems like a feeding time at the zoo, he writes. Parks, who once embraced the label Georgia's AOC after gaining support from Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, had zeroed in on running for state insurance commissioner this year. He's right when he says this. Now, no budding Paul ever said, I want to be insurance commissioner when I grow up, other than perhaps John Oxendine, the former insurance chief who loved to rush to emergencies in his state-issued car and who ended up going to prison for fraud. Still, being insurance commissioner is a statewide gig with a real full-time salary. And I would argue it's an important job, too, by the way. But when it came time to qualify to run for the job this month, Parks suddenly pulled a last-minute switcheroo. She decided to run for lieutenant governor instead. The move cheesed off many fellow Democrats who grumbled she might be screwing up a chance for them to win a statewide seat. Then she quit her Senate seat while the legislature was still in session so she could go out and raise money. That caused even more ire. Parks said she changed her plans because of an obnoxious and idiotic ad engineered by Republican State Senator Greg Dolezal, who is running in the GOP primary for lieutenant governor. Dolezal is also an aspiring Paul, looking for a job promotion, but is stuck in a crowded primary where the front runner is a fellow named Undecided. So Dolezal had a brainchild: attack Sharia law, the moral and religious code of Islam. The threat of forcing red-blooded Americans to live under strict Muslim rule scares them. Regular political ads focusing on kitchen table issues typically go in one ear and out the other. Dolezal figured he needed to grab voters by the ear and pull them toward his more MAGA-than-thou campaign. So he fiddled with AI to conjure up images of pushy and armed Muslims forcing their medieval ways on suburban USA. One scene had a robed man stopping a blonde woman from driving. Another had a masked Muslim warrior barging into a man's kitchen and splattering his happy Easter cake with a sword. Oh, the humanity. The publicity-hungry Dolezal was roundly criticized, even by some Republicans. Somehow he forgot MAGA warriors are supposed to punch down at transgender people. See, exactly. Bigotry is in their DNA. It just moves around. The target, anyway, changes. Back to Torpy. But I suppose he wants to ensure women aren't forced to wear hijabs in Hey Hira. There's some irony there. While many saw red because of the ad, Parks saw opportunity, Torpy writes. It gave her a cause, and importantly, a cause to raise money. Parks said she took the ad personally. She was first elected in 2022 as Nabila Islam, and after getting married, went as Nabila Islam Parks until this year. She said the name switch is for family reasons, not because the old surname might hurt a statewide bid. And you know what? I should respect that. I knew her as Nabila Islam. I've known her since she got married as Nabila Islam Parks, and now it's Nabila Parks. I will respect that. Back to Torpy. While leaving the Senate last week, she took a swipe at the chamber. Unfortunately, the legislature under the Republican leadership is a place where good ideas go to die. To which I would also argue, it's also where bad ideas go to thrive. And your party needs all hands on deck to prevent those bad ideas from continuing to thrive or making their way out of the chamber. That's why the last 8 days, now we're down to 5, are so important. Back to Torpy. Leaving early lets her raise campaign money for the May primary. Legislators are forbidden from raising money while in session. I mean, unless you're Burt Jones. State Senator Josh McLaren, a beautiful lib who seemed to be a shoo-in as the Democratic candidate for lieutenant governor, wasn't happy, Torpy writes. He put out a statement saying this was, quote, the type of purely political move that undermines trust with voters. McLaren added, real fighters don't act impulsively and they don't run away. That every Democratic vote is needed at this time of the session. That is true. McLaren noted that he was able to convince the GOP majority this week to reconsider draconian wording in a bill aimed at illegal drugs, saying, this is why it's important to stay and finish the job. That's what he told Bill Torpy. Parks fired back, saying McLaren was being, quote, misogynistic and calling her move impulsive. I bristle at use of words like that. If she were a black woman, would that make McLaren racist for calling her move impulsive? It's just not. It's an abuse of the word. And to me, using the word dilutes the effectiveness of the word when it is time to legitimately call it out. Back to Torpy. She said he has, quote, an amazing level of entitlement to try and suggest that as a woman, I don't have every right as a man to be in this race. I just didn't read that in a statement, though. Torpy says, I don't know about entitlement. I saw one candidate call another a quitter. But terms like misogynistic and entitlement do register with some lefty voters. Yep. Several Democratic legislators decried her Trump-like tactics for savaging her primary opponent in 2022. Interesting. Park said her goal is to stop dolezal. We cannot have someone like that shape the future of the state, she told Bill Torpy. Muslims are just as Georgian as Greg Dolezal. I'm nodding my head. Yes. I mean, I said throughout the gubernatorial primary cycle here, my heart was with the Muslim candidate. I was born in a suburban white family and grew up in a Southern Baptist church. It doesn't scare me because I think I don't. If anything, I can sit here and go through the Bible and talk about all the scary things that the Bible says about homosexuality. The right is so quick to, the Muslims, they want to take you to the top of the building, gay guy, and push you off. I'm like, there's some things in the Bible that I should bring up to you as well. If you look for the most radical passages in either book, you'll find them. So is it fair to use those passages in the Bible to characterize an entire political movement? No. Is it fair to do the same in the Quran? No. Back to Torpy. Dolezal is facing fellow Senators Blake Tillery and Steve Gooch, State Representative David Clark, as well as former State Senator John Kennedy, who resigned in December to run full-time and raise money as well. None of those are household names. That's why Dolezal is doing the absolute rabid, bat crazy stuff. Because he knows that none of those names are statewide names. I mean, when you're running for lieutenant governor, are you really running with statewide appeal anyway? You know what I mean? It's the lieutenant governor's job. It's a very important job. Burt Jones, as lieutenant governor and presiding over the state senate, has been able to influence what makes it out of the chamber. That's a very important job. It's just not governor. It's not congressperson. It's not senator. It's not flashy. But it gets you places when you get into that office. Anyway, back to Torpy, who writes, Parks admitted the job of LightGov was a bigger platform than insurance commissioner. She said, quote, primaries are a healthy part of democracy. And she didn't think McLaurin, who is supported by almost every elected Democratic official, was catching fire with the populace. But it's the lieutenant governor's job, ma'am. It's not going to. You can barely get people to go to the gubernatorial forums. The leading candidate in the gubernatorial polls is also undecided because people just aren't really paying attention outside of the bubble of those of us who do pay attention. Back to Torpy. We need someone to run statewide and not a state house campaign, she said. Some liberal Dems are unhappy with Parks, Torpy opines. State Representative Rua Roman, who is also a Muslim woman, is running for Parks' open seat. However, Parks' sudden skedaddle has made it harder for Roman, who now will have to run in a special election to fill out this year's term and then again for the open term starting next year. You know, needless drama. And I would also argue needless elections. And remember, we keep having these special elections and then runoffs because we don't do ranked choice. Anyway, that's me, not Torpy. Torpy goes, all I know is I don't have a state senator, said Roman, who is not particularly close to Parks. Democratic Senator Kim Jackson said Parks has, quote, proven she's not a team player. None of us in the Senate are lacking in ambition, but there's a way to do things, she said. She made a choice to abrogate her responsibilities, and now the voters will decide. I'll include Torpy's piece in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. Let's chew on that when we come back. Thank you so much for listening. It's the Ron Show. On Georgia Now, weekdays, 8 and 4 p.m., 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn, or if you check us out where you podcast, well, I appreciate that you do that. Back after this. That fellow Democrats don't see eye to eye is nothing surprising. How many of you, when you heard me talk and read from Torpy's piece that Representative Rua Roman and a former state senator Nabila Islam Parks don't get along, don't see eye to how many of you heard that and go, wait, they're both Muslim women. They're both Muslim American women. They should get along great. That's not how it works. And that's not how the Democratic Party works either. We are a tableau, a mosaic, if you will, of disparate ideologies that coalesce because we agree enough on enough things. Like I would say 95 to 97, 98% of the party's platform we're all in agreement with. It's the tiny little things that we don't even necessarily agree with. We just don't feel as passionately about as the rest of the coalition does, that sometimes it creates some fractures. Yesterday, in the first hour of Morning Joe on MS Now, there was some conversation in the aftermath of the Illinois Democratic primary and conversations about whether it's moderate, establishment, liberal, progressive, who comes away winners, and what does this mean for the future of the party, the midterms, in the near term, and in 2028 as well. And we'll pick up on that conversation right here, where David Drucker from Bloomberg came on to discuss a piece that he wrote.
Big night for Pritzker, who, we all anticipate running for president, so that certainly helps. And then, indeed, the most progressive candidates lost. And that ties in, David Drucker, with something you've written recently for Bloomberg. Your new piece is titled, Your Average Democratic Voter Isn't a Left-Winger. Very timely. Tell us more as to what you found out.
Yeah, there was a Democratic poll conducted for Third Way, which is a centrist Democratic think tank here in town.
Centrist.
And what they discovered in a February poll conducted for them is that your average, your typical Democratic primary voter is a 55-year-old white woman, a 55-plus white woman without a college degree, or put it differently to be very specific about statistics here. A majority of Democratic primary voters are white. They're also women. They're also over the age of 55. They also do not have a college degree. And, what's so fascinating to me about the poll is it sort of tells us one of the things that we have seen in Democratic, and you could say this about Republican politics if we were doing that, but generally the most pragmatic presidential candidate of the bunch in a primary tends to win the presidential nomination. Sometimes you have a candidate who can excite the base and excite rank and file voters. But every 4 years, when there's an open primary, you see candidates run to the right, they run to the left, and most of their voters are somewhere in this larger middle, right? They want to win, they want electable candidates. This poll also showed that they want a fighter, somebody who's willing to take on Republicans, but that they don't, their personal politics don't line up with the very far left, and every party has its wing. When I spoke to Third Way after the poll, and I said, did anything surprise you about this? And of course, this is where Third Way lives, so not much surprised them. But one thing did, which is the poll shows that 57% of Democratic primary voters, your typical Democratic primary voter, calls themselves or says that they are a Christian. And many say that they are evangelical or born again. And so what does that tell you? That most Democratic primary voters are like the rest of America in some way or another. And that if you want to win in 2028, if you want to win that primary, instead of trying to satisfy every group and every questionnaire from the progressive left, look where most voters are and try and satisfy them.
I had, I can't remember the guy's name. I had the fella on from the Third Way within the last year, and he mentioned the same thing. Now, I don't find myself agreeing with, but again, 95% of Democratic Party platform policy, I'm with the Third Way on. I'm not a Third Way Democrat, though, because I have lived 52 years on this planet, and for the last 4 decades or so, I have been that Democrat that has watched as the party try so hard to woo the Reagan Democrat. That doesn't exist. It's a myth. They don't exist anymore. They're wearing red MAGA hats. Do you really want to attract that? I mean, I guess we're at this point now where we should be interested in attracting disaffected MAGA voters, the ones who are pissed off, ones who got swept up in the Trump populism of 2016 and continued to buy into it up until and through the 2024 election day calendar. Sure, but not their ideology, not their basal instincts. I don't want to feed into that. But I am myself weary of purity tests. And you're talking to a Bernie guy, right? Like the thing I loved about Bernie's campaign in 2016 and 2020 before the entire primary calendar was shut down because of COVID. The thing I liked about Bernie Sanders was that, like, people wanted to nuance, he's not a real Democrat. He won't join his ideology was more in line with the party's platform than the establishment choices were. That to me was like the most baffling thing. It's like, nitpick and quibble about him all you want, or talk to us about like, he's a rat. He is in lockstep with the party's platform. Isn't that what we would want? Now, I get it. No purity test. We don't want to enforce a purity test on our candidates to the point that it influences our electable candidates to take positions that may not jibe with the mainstream. But there are, to me, there are red lines. You can't be anti-trans. You can't be anti-Muslim. You can't be anti-LGBTQI plus, period. In my mind, you will have to be pro-choice. You do need to be pro-civil rights. You do have to abhor tax cuts for the wealthiest among us while the middle class struggles. You do need to be pro-collective bargain. I mean, I don't think that any of these things are wildly radical positions that would derail a candidate's campaign once they make it out of the primary into the general. But having poured through that poll and applying it to, I guess, recent history politically, specifically within the Democratic Party, I'll go back to the 2008 presidential primary as an example. I think that there are some things that we find ourselves getting finger wagged at by the establishment, by the moderate liberal portion of the party. They're looking at the left flank and finger wagging, and I can turn it right back around because I think there's something to have learned from the 2008 presidential primary, for example. And then we can apply it to the 2016. We can't apply it to the 2020 and the 2024 because the party didn't really have a primary season in either of those 2 years, which is sort of what made the whole argument about rallying to preserve democracy kind of hard for those outside the party to swallow. And we have to remember, again, not everybody that's going to vote for Democratic candidates are inside the party or follow this stuff every day. We've got to make this conversation a little bit more mainstream. Well, that's my goal every day on this show anyway. So we'll pick up on that conversation. It's The Ron Show, Georgia Now, Progressive Voice via TuneIn or every podcast.
Call or text The Ron Show anytime at 404-919-2725.
So I began this conversation by pointing out how the GOP will take and cherry pick from the Quran, for example, right? And find the craziest stuff in the Quran and tell you that, that's how Muslim Americans think. That's how a Muslim American politician would think. And we can't let Sharia law creep into our lexicon, right? But you can do the same thing with the Bible. When I'm talking about the poll that came out here recently that David Drucker wrote about in Bloomberg, there are some things that Democratic polling tells you are the minority opinion, but are latched onto by the right as well. And it's why the purity test stuff is, I don't know, it's a self-defeat. It's a circular firing squad sort of thing. I want to pick up on his piece in Bloomberg. According to an expansive poll conducted recently for centrist Democratic think tank Third Way, a majority of Democratic vote. And by the way, don't think that it doesn't cross my mind that when you read that, oh, this organization did this poll, well, okay, now I want to read the questions. How leading are they? Centrist Democratic think tank Third Way. So how much were the questions leading? I'm going to take them. I'm going to take them at face value until I see otherwise. Anyway, Third Way, majority of Democratic voters who expect to vote in a presidential primary are white women over 55 who lack a college degree and describe themselves as liberal and moderate. Only 11% identify as progressive, and nearly as many say they are conservative. So, I mean, but again, you ask the average person outside the political bubble, the folks who talk about this stuff all the time, I would tell you that most people who vote for Democratic candidates are going to call themselves liberal, even if they don't really know what that means on the spectrum. You know what I mean? It's no different than, like, for much of Rush Limbaugh's existence in the talk spectrum, he bastardized the word liberal. He turned it into a curse word. Anyone in conservative punditry and those who listened to them or tuned into them on Fox News, the word liberal, they would sneer it. They wouldn't say it. They would sneer. Liberal. They hated the word. Like, it was akin to being Marxist, puppy killer. You know what I mean? So the word liberal didn't have much cachet with folks who were afraid that they actually were liberal. They were afraid to say it. People were afraid. I know, kids. Can you believe that back in my day, yes, people were afraid to say that they were liberal in the 90s and early 2000s. That's a fact. Anyway, back to the Third Way piece, David Drucker writing. On the critical issue of what to do about, for example, immigration and customs enforcement in the wake of Trump's polarizing mass deportation program, 66% of those polled, these are Democratic voters, 66% of those polled want ICE held accountable and overhauled, not abolished. 2/3 of Democrats polled want ICE held accountable and overhauled. 34% want the agency abolished. Republican politicians will tell you that Democrats want to abolish ICE. Well, polling says no, most Democrats don't. Drucker writing, that's a lot of myth busting for one survey. It's also ironic. In the past, many Democratic presidential contenders have chased the approval of the party's left wing on charged cultural and public policy issues. Kamala Harris didn't do that. What? Now, I think to some extent, Joe Biden may have. We'll chew on that in a little bit. They especially did so in 2020, Drucker writes. Yes, Biden. Okay. Among some of the policies Democratic presidential contenders backed in that primary, some form of nationalized health care, sometimes referred to as Medicare for All, decriminalizing illegal border crossings, and having the government provide health care to immigrants in the U.S. illegally. I think that's a bit of a stretch, but that strategy isn't just bad general election politics, it's bad primary politics, as Lene Erickson, Third Way Senior Vice President for Social Policy, Education, and Politics, explained at a briefing to announce the poll. When you think of who these Democratic primary voters are, they're much more like the rest of America, she said, versus dogmatic lefty of Trump's or progressive activists' imagination. This is where the Third Way kind of like chafes me, though. You want that easy to pluck, low hanging fruit voter. You don't demonize them when they agree with you on 98% of substantive policy. The thing that sort of baffles me about their reaction to the poll, however, Lene Erickson says this: the fact that 58% of primary voters call themselves Christian, with 3 times as many Democratic primary voters self-identifying as born again or evangelical than the number who identify as atheist at merely 9%, really burst my mental bubble, she said. Even someone like me who studies these voters all the time forgets who they really are and what their lives are like. Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock is in the U.S. Senate. James Tallarico, who is, I believe, a Methodist, right? Seminarian, is seeking to ascend to the U.S. Senate himself from the state of Texas. And apparently is triggering a lot of reactions. It's making MAGA evangelicals feel a lot of things about him. And they have sharpened their attacks on him as being the faux Christian, which is, to me, just delicious, because if anyone's a faux Christian, well, what was it? He did something that I thought was pretty interesting. He was, I believe, in an African-American church when he said this in response to right-wing reaction to him and his embrace of Christianity.
The President of the United States just said that I insulted Jesus. You want to know what insults Jesus? Kicking the sick off their health care while cutting taxes for billionaires.
Sounds progressive to me.
You know what insults Jesus? Deporting the stranger and separating babies from their mothers. You know what insults Jesus? Bombing innocent school children in Iran and sending our brave men and women off to die in another forever war. You know what insults Jesus? Covering up the Epstein files and then refusing to prosecute a single person in them. I am not a perfect Christian. I don't claim to be. There's only been one perfect Christian, and he was crucified on a cross 2,000 years ago. Jesus told us, he told us to love our neighbors as ourselves. He told us on earth as it is in heaven. Can we imagine war in heaven? Can we imagine bigotry in heaven? Can we imagine poverty in heaven? Then why do we tolerate these things on earth?
Yes. That guy sounds like a progressive to me, though. Yeah, I mean, that's what Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock is. He's cast as more of a progressive Democratic senator. He's also an African American, and we have to remember that in the African American and Latino communities, there tends to be a little bit more of a more moderation when it comes to social issues. It's also why I've always I don't implore Republicans or conservatives to do this, but I do point out to them, I'm like, if you guys would stop demonizing people of color, stop embracing the white nationalism, Yeah, I mean, you might find yourself with some disaffected white nationalist voters who feel as if you let them down or double cross them some kind of way. You might find that you'd lose some of that vote, or they wouldn't be as passionate about your candidacies, your campaign, your party. But if the Republican Party ever figured out that by ending the demonization of black and brown voters, that they would win over a lot of black and brown voters on other policy issues, to me, the shift would be pretty jarring. But as long as the Republican Party is ruled by a white nationalist cabal, and that has only been so obvious in the last 10, 11, 12 years or so. It used to be subtle. It used to be hidden. The Republican Party used to kind of keep that under the vest, while not popping the hood to show us what's in the engine. Right? It's always been a part of the engine, and as I mentioned at the top of the show, they bounce from one phobia to the other, whether it's homophobia, Islamophobia, whether it's pushback against DEI. They're always bouncing around on a phobia. 2004, homophobia got George W. Bush reelected when he was an unpopular president who admired us into 2 forever wars. Does that sound familiar? So gay marriage amendments popped up on state ballots all over the country, and that pushed him over the top. Sharia law, Islamophobia fanned the Barack Obama disdain in 2008. It gave rise to Donald Trump, who spent years questioning his citizenship, his ability to run for president. All of these phobias exist within the GOP. That is without question. And I'll just go back to what I said before. If they ever figured out by eliminating the demonization of black and brown people who tend to gravitate more towards their faith, whether it's Christianity or Islam or Judaism, if they would ever figure out that if they stopped demonizing minorities, that they would win over huge chunks of voters, then Democrats would be in a big mess. But there's more of a takeaway to take from this polling, and again, when you look at the raw numbers, 43% ascribe themselves as liberal, 34% moderate. When you go from center to left, you go, what do you go? You go conservative, 5%, moderate, 34%. That's only 39% of the Democratic Party. Liberal, progressive, socialist, that's 43, 11, and 6. That's 60% of the party. Did I do that right? Yeah, that's 60% of the party. Liberal, progressive, socialist. When you add them all up, that is 60% of the party. Now, I'm not saying that you have to go full-on socialist, but you ask Democratic Party voters, primary voters, about specific issues, and you find that they're a little more socialist than they'd like to admit, because, again, the word socialist has been demonized. The way Third Way demonizes progressive. The way the right wing demonized for decades liberal. And if you eschew the labels and just focus on the policies, then the party finds that they're way more in alignment than even they knew because of polling like that from the Third Way. It's The Ron Show. So let me push back a little bit more on some of the Third Way's findings. This I found to be really interesting. Among Democratic primary voters, they say 72% value candidates who are authentic and true to what they believe in. Yes. Which is why it always troubles me when the right launches an attack on a candidate and the candidate doesn't have a response for it. it augurs weakness. It's the sort of thing that I've said this so many times on the show. I should print T-shirts or a hat, maybe. Americans are drawn to strength. Even if you think that something you believe in passionately could be unpopular, try espousing it from a position of strength. More findings. 88% of Democratic primary voters are willing to vote for someone, get this, that they don't agree with on every issue, as long as the candidate is strong and will fight for the working people of this country. Now, this was national polling. This wasn't done here in the state of Georgia. But here we are in the midst of, I would say, a somewhat heated gubernatorial primary. Ironically, the heat is for somehow making the runoff. It's, I guess, presumed. We talked about this yesterday, glossing over a Peanut Politics blog written by Keith McCants. It seems as if the field has decided Keisha Lance Bottoms is making the runoff, so the fight should be for second place to make that runoff, at which point I guess then that candidate, whoever that candidate is, will sharpen their attacks on the former Atlanta mayor. McCann's opining, why is no one testing this now? Gubernatorial candidates from the GOP, Rick Jackson, has already sent out mailers attacking Keisha Lance Bottoms. Perhaps, I guess, doing the work for the rest of the Democratic field for them. And, you know, there's this curious connection. Listen, I'm not putting this out there to say that there's some sort of coordination, because I'm certain there's not. There is a little of an interesting Rick Jackson, Jeff Duncan history. Jackson once a big supporter of Jeff Duncan, as Jeff was an aspiring politician back in the day. But I'm certain there's no coordination. I'm also fairly certain that each of the 7 candidates who have been on the campaign trail believe what they say they are for, even Jeff Duncan. And it's, you may be surprised to hear me say that if you've listened to the show and you're like, oh, you really haven't been a Jeff Duncan cheerleader. I question someone who makes the quick pivot that he has made from lieutenant governor of the state of Georgia as a member of the Republican Party, while in power and in office overseeing some bills becoming laws that he guided through the state Senate that he now wants to undo. Yes, that we have to have that discussion. This quick pivot from I want to save the Republican Party to I'm going to create a new version of the Republican Party to I'm an independent to I'm going to go campaign for Kamala Harris to I'm a Democrat. It was all within like an 18-month window. And he's right when he says he has given up more to be where he is to run for the office that he's running for than any other candidate. He is absolutely right. He's sacrificed a lot to do that. So when I say that I hear Jeff Duncan and what he espouses, like, I believe him. I also happen to think that with a lot of politicians on the right, and maybe in his case as well, he probably always believed this sort of stuff that he now openly states he supports. It's just that to get elected on the right, there are things you have to say, things you have to do that you may not personally believe in, but you realize the throngs that support you do, so you're going to carry through on it, whether you believe in it or not. Where Jeff is different than the rest of the field is that he is a heterosexual white male. Actually, they're all heterosexual. That hasn't come up. So I'm pretty sure they're all lockstep heterosexual. But he's a heterosexual white male. He has never been under the microscope of being a marginalized human being in these United States. I can appreciate that he has seen the light and wants to fight for the plight of the marginalized. He's received some notable African American support in recent weeks. The next shoes to drop would have to be pro-choice women, strongly advocating for pro-choice policy. the LGBTQI plus. But actually, let me not make this about Jeff Duncan. My point is, Democratic voters in the state of Georgia have to look at the 7 candidates and realize, there's, maybe 4 that have a viable shot here. And look at the 4 of them and go, if that's the nominee, I'm going to vote for that person. And say so. There are prominent Democrats in the state who have already decided if candidate A, B, C, D is the nominee, I will not vote for them. I also happen to think that has to factor in, it's so complicated to be a voter, it has to factor into who you decide you're going to vote for as well. I happen to know that candidate right there, if they're the nominee, will piss off enough of the base that it's going to be problematic to get them elected. Yes, you have to think that. Sorry, you do. It's why I've coalesced on the person that I'm going to vote for being the candidate that should win the Democratic primary here in the state of Georgia. And since I've had all 7 candidates on, I've been wondering, why haven't I just gone out and said who I believe that person should be? I'm just going to go ahead and say it. And then I'll spend the next segment, good portion of the next hour, explaining why. To me, it's Jason Esteves, which may not surprise a lot of people. I remember stating, I believe when he announced his campaign, I'm like, this guy is factory made, primed for marketability. And I hate to drill it down to just marketability because that sounds so frivolous, so thin, so flimsy. But he is a very marketable candidate. He has a ton of bona fides that, again, I'll go over in a little bit. But I'm also going to be the grown-up here and say that if Jason Esteves doesn't win the primary, if it is, in fact, going to come down to Keisha Lance Bottoms or Jeff Duncan in the primary, or throw in Mike Thurmond if he somehow ascends. Again, we have limited polling. We have really no idea who is going to. I mean, the primary results, May 19th, could be a total surprise to us. But if it is following form to polling, and it does come down to Keisha Lance Bottoms or Jeff Duncan, there are a lot of people who have said, I won't vote for the Democratic candidate if it's Keisha or it's Jeff. And we're so inside the pot on the stove in the kitchen that we don't realize that what we're cooking probably smells good to those outside the kitchen. And that's what we have to be careful not to do. Not to stew in the pot, to poison the pot, to sour the taste of what we're cooking. Because at the end of the day, you look at what's on the other side. They're calling themselves Slick Rick versus Bribing Bert. To me, it's ick. Ick Rick. Rick is ick. And Bert, we all know why we don't like Bert. We all know why we don't want Bert elected. Bert has made himself quite handsomely wealthy while in power and wants to eliminate the income tax and put the burden on the working class. Consumption taxes will have to fill in the gap. And all. We know all that. So yes, I'm publicly stating why I am the guy that's going to vote for Jason Esteves. But I'm also the guy that's going to be responsible and say, if Jeff Duncan is the nominee, then it's going to be Jeff Duncan. I'm going to be full-throatedly behind Jeff Duncan because I'm going to have to believe that his pivot is legitimate. And I kind of think all along it was there anyway. Or if it's Keisha Lance Bottoms, I'm going to get behind Keisha Lance Bottoms. And I'm going to worry less about what happened in 2020. Although it's there, you can't ignore it. And the same for Duncan and his history as a lieutenant governor. And worry more about the here and the now and what she says she wants to do in Georgia's future. So there it is. I feel like I just came out all over again. And I'm comfortable doing so. Anyway, that's hour number 1 of the Ron Show. Thank you so much for listening. We do this every weekday on Georgia Now. 8 a.m. We do the rerun at 4 p.m. now. We flipped it. 11 p.m. at Progressive Voices via TuneIn. Or if you listen to wherever you podcast, you're like, well, whatever. I listen where I podcast. Show notes, as always, at ronshowatl.com. Thank you so much for listening.
From From the heart of the city too busy to hate, a progressive voice making too much sense for corporate media's comfort. This is The Ron Show, where we the people come first. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Thank you for hanging around, listening at weekdays, 8 a.m. on Georgia Now, the rerun 4 p.m. as well, if that's when you listen, because you got used to it. I was in that time slot for so long. I'm still there. It's just that you're getting the morning edition in the afternoon instead of getting the afternoon edition the following morning. It's more comfortable. And actually, it gets me the opportunity to work on the rest of the stuff that I have to do during the day. I'm a residential realtor. I run my own streaming audio station. Audio Gate TL, by the way, if you haven't downloaded that app. That's a fun little station. Come on, check it out. Pop music, dance music, of course, interwoven into the format, of course. We get news from the Georgia Voice and community fairs, stuff like that. It's lots of fun. There's also me managing Georgia Now. Some of the other shows that we get on Georgia Now, whether it's Kudzu Vine, At the Kitchen Table, we're working on adding a couple other shows. Like I manage that station, such as I do. With a little bit of time. So anyway, we flipped the schedule so that the show can fit into my schedule a little bit, but also I think be a little bit fresher in the daytime to kind of go over the headlines of the day from the day before. The part that I do need to work on a little bit more, though, I don't have a producer anymore. Brendan, if you're listening, man, miss you, dude. But I have to get the schedule right so that I can have the guests on more frequently that we were having on in the afternoons. And that has more to do with like their time slots, their schedules, and maybe I need to start booking them the afternoon before. I want to share something that now that I've told the world who it is that I've decided my vote is going to go to, and I'm still not going to spend a whole lot of time demonizing other candidates on the primary ballot. But I did announce last segment that, like, for me, my heart was with Representative Ruel Roman, because she, to me, was more in line with my values, but not to the point where I was like, if it's not her, I'm not voting. That's just not who I am. That's not how I've ever been. And trust me when I tell you, it really was tough for me. Come at me if you want. It was tough for me to vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016. Not because I bought into the 30 years of demonization or any of that stuff. There were valid criticisms you could make about then Secretary Clinton, her tepid support for the LGBTQI+. In fact, it wasn't really even all that. It was a staunch no on gay marriage when the other candidate, Bernie Sanders, had long been in support of marriage equality for the LGBTQI+. And that wasn't the only reason, obviously. I believe that, he was right there behind her. We all saw the photo, right? When she was the face of universal health care in the 1990s, Hillary Care. It's why the Affordable Care Act came to be, honestly, if we're being honest, Republicans, Heritage Foundation folks, because the right was so scared of universal health care becoming popular in the 1990s, they quickly devised something else that sort of became Romney Care, which sort of became the blueprint for the Affordable Care Act. Anyway, Bernie was right there with Hillary in the 1990s, ready to fight for universal health care, and he never got off that. He's like that dog that got the chew toy, and he will not let go. The jaws are locked in. That's where Bernie is. So anyway, I don't want to go back to relitigating 2016, but I did last segment say, for me, it makes so much sense for Jason Esteves to be the Democratic Party nominee for governor in 2026, and a lot of it has to do with him. I mean, his story is wonderful. He is a bright, younger, vibrant candidate. He checks off the ideology boxes, the positions. He's coming out with plans to offer universal health care. That is huge for the young working family and really eats away at some of the kitchen table budgetary problems, right? But this is not going to be about me going over his platform. This is simply me looking at the field and thinking, there's not a lot that, And Rick Jackson sort of signaled it for me. This is really like Rick Jackson sort of like, you know what? That's why I have to be contemplative about who it is that I'm going to support. Telegraphing for me how Rick Jackson plans to attack Keisha Lance Bottoms is more of an insight into Rick Jackson's character, but also I know as a longtime Georgia resident, I grew up in this state. I was born in this state. I've lived in this state most of my life. I know how voters tend to respond to those sorts of attacks. That I know that it's going to be an uphill climb. And at the end of the day, I don't want to say lazy. I'm not lazy. I want my work to be easier. I really do. I'd like my work to be easier. And we all do, right? It's why we embrace technology. It's why there's so much of a hesitance for many of us to go, wait, we want to go back to hand-marked paper ballots, but the touchscreens were so easy. It's just that in this era, you've got people who question them. And so, like, just to get through this era, just go back to the hand-marked paper ballots for a little while. Whatever. We'll be able to augment that, or I say augment, to make that more, modern. I get it. But when it comes to who the nominee is going to be, there are going to be questions about Keisha Lance Bottoms. We've asked them openly on this show. I asked them personally to her on this show, and she answered them. I'm satisfied with her answers. But again, I'm that voter that's not going to hold my breath if she's the nominee and say, I'm not voting for her. If she's not my choice, I can't do that. We can't do that. We can't afford to do that. The Democratic Party cannot afford to do that. So, Rick Jackson sort of made me realize, I can vote for Keisha Lance Bottoms if she's the nominee, and I will support her if she's the nominee, and I will work hard on this show to point out the differences between her positions, her ideology, and background, and if it's Rick Jackson or Burt Jones, his. I will do the same for Mike Thurmond. I have questions and ask them openly to him on this show as well. I also happen to think that there's going to be an issue with anyone who has any hint of the Atlanta Public Safety Training Facility, a.k.a. Cop City, on their breath. That affects Keisha Lance Bottoms. That affects Mike Thurmond. I know, because I hear it, I see it all the time, questions with staunch Democrats about Jeff Duncan. And again, I'm that responsible voter who hears everything he says and accepts him at his word. And look at his positions, his policy positions, his platform, et cetera, and so on, and go, okay, I can get behind that. If he's the nominee, I'm going to get behind that. And what I think actually makes him the second most comfortable candidate for me is that if he becomes the nominee, the folks you got to convince aren't the folks on the right. They're not. What are you going to come at Jeff Duncan and attack him for the things that he did while in office that you agree with? No, that's not a problem for Republicans. The thing they'll come at him after is his switch. Okay, we on the left shouldn't have a problem with that, right? In fact, there are a lot of independents who won't have a problem with that in the current Trump era. Yeah, I mean, how many of you are surprised? You're like, wait, did you just say Jeff Duncan is the second easiest candidate for you to get behind? It's kind of where I am right now. And, no disrespect to Senator Derek Jackson. It's not that I don't like Derek. Derek was one of the first candidates I had on the show. I do like Derek, and I agree with him substantively on the policies that he espouses. It's viability, and I just he's not been able to fundraise very well, and while he's polling not all that far off from Jason Esteves, Esteves has been able to fundraise, and he does have the backing of a long list of state legislators. So, yeah, for me, it's Jason Esteves. Jason, by the way, took to social media to share something really personal that resonated with me. And it's another reason why I just see him as a viable, likable, relatable candidate that I think can be a powerhouse. He's almost Obama-esque in some ways. Nobody's Obama. but Obama-esque in some ways. So I'm going to share that social media post with you. I mean, he put it on social media on his candidate page, so I don't see any reason why. But it's very personal. It's very emotional. It's very raw. It is. It to me provides some insight for anyone else who doesn't see what I see about why I think he is the most viable candidate on the Georgia Democratic Party gubernatorial ticket. We'll do that when the Ron Show returns. Jason Esteves earlier this week on his social media account.
My mom is dying, and I know that's a crazy thing to say, but I wanted to take a brief moment to talk about why it's important for me to tell you that. My mom has had Alzheimer's for the last 12 years, and I've been her caregiver for the last 10. And a couple weeks ago, she had a stroke that significantly impacted her ability to eat. And because of that, and because she lost all her executive function because of the disease, there is no recovery. So right now she is in hospice care and is beginning to transition, unfortunately. I am a part of the sandwich generation, which means I'm caring for my parents while at the same time caring for young children. And I will tell you that caregiving is a traumatic experience. It's hard. I've done things for my mom that she never would have liked for me to do, but I had to. And what I've noticed is every time I talk about the challenges that I faced, every time I talk about the trauma, people appreciate it. So in this very difficult moment, I wanted to post this video and tell you what my mom has done for me that has made it easier for me in this journey. And first and foremost, she gave me my values, something that I talk about on the campaign trail. My spirituality, my religion, but also my desire to help people. She was always a giving person, and it's the reason that I've been in public service for most of my life. But at the end of her life, she's also given me peace of mind. And that's because around the time she was diagnosed, we executed one of these. It is an advanced health directive. We also executed a power of attorney that gave me authority over her finances and over making health decisions when she lost that ability. And it made it clear the instructions that she left, what she wanted and what she didn't want. And because of those clear instructions that said she didn't want artificial life support, she didn't want feeding tubes or anything like that, we didn't have to make that decision for her. She had made it for herself. Right now, there are caregivers, family members who are struggling with those very decisions. And fortunately, I don't have to make that decision. That decision was made over a decade ago. So instead of having that additional burden, that trauma, my mom has allowed me to focus at this time on what matters the most, and that's celebrating her. So y'all, whether you are a senior or in the sandwich generation, or if you're a young adult and this all seems very far and foreign to you, I want you to talk to your family. I want you to talk to your children or to your parents about this. It's very easy to do. AI can help you, or if you can afford it, hire an attorney. Either way, having these discussions early will save you a lot of stress and a lot of trauma later on. Mommy, I love you. I will certainly miss you, but I want to thank you for everything you've done for me and for getting me here.
The first time I watched that, it's affecting me now. The first time I watched that, it took me back to a couple of moments in my life. My maternal grandfather, Edward T. Zato, stout, strong, deep-voiced. I mean, the kind of voice as a former military, right? He staff sergeant. I mean, he had a lot of men under his leadership who, you know, the sphincter tightened the minute that voice cracked. And as a grandfather, I remember it too. When Pop said something, when he snapped, you snapped to attention. He was a strong man who, after his military service, used to work at the Sam Solomon, which would become the Service Merchandise, I believe, in Augusta, Georgia, back in the warehouse. Yeah, I mean, that's that guy, you know. Worked with his hands, worked with his arm, stout shoulders, I remember I was 9 years old when he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And the subsequent 10 years after, watching that strong, stout man just wither away. Mentally, intellectually, just become a vegetable. They're in human form, physically fine. You know, he had some walking issues from jumping out of helicopters during the Korean War, but so the Alzheimer's thing is something that is immediately relatable for me. And again, this is not why I decided, but it's the relatability. I also listened to a man talk about grappling with losing his mother. I lost my mother to cancer in 2011. And again, that's not because we share that common trait. That's not why. But I sat there and listened to him for 3+ minutes on social media in the throes of a campaign. And I didn't once hear him talk about the campaign. Or I didn't, there's not a bug. There's not a bug. I mean, the logo, there's not a campaign logo. You know, if you support me, or if you believe me, or if you believe with me this, nothing that smacked of fundraising. The post was not even about him. He was just offering advice as someone who's going through something deeply personal. He didn't have to share any of that. It could have just come out in the press once his mother passes. I don't know if she has or not yet. And the campaign rolls on. And I also don't think that that post was something of a grandstand, a use of the moment to capitalize on. Yesterday, we talked about the fact that Rick Jackson had his people reach out to Burt Jones to do a video tribute to Rick Jackson using a foster child charity last fall. And now you see that in a campaign ad. That to me that's just not who Jason Esteves is in my limited interactions with him. That was a really vulnerable moment for Jason, and I'd have to rewatch it, but I don't even believe that there were cuts. Like, I think that was just a straight shot, one take video. And in it, he implored those who watched to get with their family and have conversations about advanced directives. I'm 52 years old. I don't have kids. I don't have, I have an older sibling, a younger sibling, and I don't, my friends, my close friends here in Atlanta, one of whom is a doctor and the other is, they have told me, make sure you have an advanced directive. And it's something that I need to do, right? We had a close call with a mutual friend, and thankfully he's doing better, but he didn't have an advanced directive. And it was a watershed moment, an eye opener, as is, Jason's plight with his mother, having to do things that he knows that she never dreamed he would have to do on her behalf. Some of us have been through that. We were fortunate that my grandfather had, fantastic health insurance because he had served in the military for so many years, right? My mother had really good insurance because my father worked on the bowels of a hospital in downtown Augusta for nearly 4 decades and came with good insurance. I mean, he could have even taken this opportunity to talk about his health care plan. He didn't do that. I'll add to it. Even in these gutting times, like what he and his family are experiencing, there are moments to be grateful because so many of us don't have that safety net. For many, through no fault of their own, they'll fall into economic despair or further into it to care for a loved one because they lack that safety net. It takes a personal economic toll, and those tolls add up in a community, a state, and a nation. We should do better as a society. We can do better as a society. That's me talking. That's not Jason Esteves, who just simply took to social media to share something he's going through, deeply personal, but also spent a few minutes to offer some advice to those in, as he called it, we've known it to be the sandwich generation, the generation that is caring for kids while also caring for parents. It is an incredible burden, and it's a conversation we're long overdue for having. And though there are those who have been espousing for the sandwich generation, but I don't feel like when we talk about affordability, we talk about healthcare costs, like I don't feel like that there's enough of that conversation being had. We've seen more evidence of it in our societal entertainment. HGTV with the backyard builds of mother-in-law suites and stuff like that. We've seen more of that. And on scripted television as well. Mom moves in with the son. The unexpected hilarity ensues. The Golden Girls, for crying out loud. 4 seniors having to live together to pool their resources. We've seen more evidence there than we have in our political discourse. It's a long overdue conversation. I'm willing to have it, even if at this moment Jason isn't. It's The Ron Show. Georgia Now, Progressive Voice via TuneIn.
This is The Ron Show.
A moment of bipartisanship in the Georgia General Assembly. Let me take you back a few days to a floor speech on the House floor. The youngest representative in the Georgia Democratic Coalition, I believe in the House, period. Representative Akbar Ali.
Speaker. Today, I rise to speak on the affordability problem our state currently faces. In recent days, we've seen the numbers on the signs at gas stations creeping upward, and we know exactly what that means for the single mother or the small business owner trying to keep their delivery van on the road. Colleagues, we cannot boast that we have the cheapest gas prices in our nation if our citizens still cannot afford them. A low price relative to other states means absolutely nothing to the Georgian who is choosing between a full tank of gas and a full bag of groceries. That is why today I am encouraging the state government to exercise our authority to temporarily suspend the gas tax. This is a practical and simple step to ease the burden on working class families. It is a way to ensure that when a single mother, a hardworking father, or a college student trying to minimize loans goes to the gas pump tomorrow, they are not paying a premium for a world of uncertainty they did not create. Let's provide real relief now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
So, good news. It looks like that's going to happen. Let me read to you from Alonda Roker at the Georgia Recorder. Georgia House of Representatives, in a surprise move, passed a bill Wednesday with a provision suspending the state's gas tax for 60 days. HB 1199, sponsored by State Representative John Carson, Republican from Marietta, is a yearly routine bill that brings the Georgia tax code in line with the IRS. A last-minute amendment proposed on the House floor suspends the gas tax for 60 days, once signed by Governor Brian Kemp, who last week said he was monitoring the situation but did not commit to suspending the gas tax. The bill passed the House on a 163-4 vote and is now awaiting action in the Senate. Gas prices have jumped since the U.S.-Israeli war in Iran began. Oh, we're calling it a war? On February 28th. Gas prices nationwide averaged about $3.84 Wednesday. That's up from $2.92 1 month ago, according to AAA. In Georgia, the average sat at $3.73 per gallon. Representative Carson quoting, "Georgians need relief right in the gas pump. With all the controversy going on in the Middle East, gas prices are up about $1 that I've seen. We're going to put a suspension on the Georgia gas tax for 60 days upon the governor's signature." Carson said he had not been in contact with the governor regarding the proposal, but the governor's office seemed open to it when asked Wednesday. The governor is always actively working to find ways to support hardworking Georgians, including this step alongside the legislature to keep more money in their pockets. This follows passage of a fourth tax refund and builds on multiple previous suspensions of the state gas tax. Exactly. Saving families over $10 billion since 2021, according to Kemp spokesperson Carter Chapman. The current gas tax for gasoline is 33.3 cents per gallon and 37.3 cents per gallon for diesel. By suspending the state motor fuel tax for 60 days, we are delivering meaningful, timely relief to millions of Georgia drivers and families when and where it's needed most, according to House Speaker John Burns, a Newington Republican, in a statement. Akbar Ali, Lawrenceville Democrat, who previously pushed for the gas tax suspension, said in a statement that passing the measure is a victory for the working people of Georgia. This relief ensures that when Georgians go to the pump tomorrow, they are no longer paying a premium for a world of uncertainty they did not create. I mean, you may think that that's kind of a nothing burger. I get it. When gas has jumped by nearly $1, eliminating a third of that increase, it softens the blow. But what I like pointing out about that is that, look, there are moments of bipartisanship. I would also tell you, by the way, that there are moments when it's easy for me as the left-wing pundit to point out, well, it's funny that there's not this opportunity on the governor's part to grandstand, because he did that quite a bit when gas prices spiked when President Joe Biden was in office. And they were quick to point out, but due to Biden-era policies, I mean, I can just hear, I don't have the time because I'm running on a deadline here. I could sit here and pull up the Brian Kemp quote, the Biden-era policies, which weren't true. That gas spike happening under Joe Biden's presidency actually can be traced back to an April 2020 deal that Donald Trump signed with OPEC to throttle back production because the oil industry was cratering because nobody was driving anywhere. Remember, we were all sheltering in place, and they were like, we got all this gas and oil to sell, and nobody's buying. So they throttled back production, and they agreed to do it for 2 years. Why they agreed for 2 years is beyond me. The pandemic came on us so fast, there was no reason to believe that it was going to happen. In any event, that 2-year agreement lasted through April of 2022. Gas prices, had spiked by June. Inflation had peaked by June of 2022 and started cooling after that. I don't think that's a coincidence. Clearly not. And obviously, bipartisan understanding in the Georgia General Assembly under the Gold Dome that, okay, we probably should do something about that because it's going to affect the cost of everything, and we don't want that to happen again. Yes. The governor's not grandstanding about it this time, though. And the idea didn't come from him this time. So he's just going to be a little bit more quiet. He's not publicly said a thing about this gas tax suspension, but his office at least is saying the right thing. So, okay, kudos. I just want to take the opportunity to applaud our bipartisanship happening under the Gold Dome. Now, let's get back to the divisiveness. Senator John Ossoff grilling DNI head Tulsi Gabbard yesterday. Take a listen to this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. And before I ask you a few questions, I want to call everyone's attention again to this fundraising email signed by the president that Senator Kelly mentioned earlier, in which the President of the United States invites his campaign donors to, quote, claim your spot, join now to receive private national security briefings to his political donors, featuring a photo of the president at a dignified transfer ceremony with a flag-draped coffin.
It's disgusting.
Of an American service member killed in action returning to their family. And the American people need to know that the President of the United States is fundraising for his political campaign and his PAC using images of American service members killed in action, and it's a disgrace.
And by the way, the family had asked that there be no cameras at that event.
Now, Director Gabbard, I'd like to reground this in your core responsibilities. Under the law, you are responsible for providing national intelligence to the President, correct?
Yes.
And to the heads of executive branch departments and agencies, yes?
Yes.
And to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and senior military commanders?
Across the IC, yes.
And to the Senate and the House and relevant committees, correct?
Yes.
And the law states that the national intelligence you provide to Congress, quote, should be timely, objective, and independent of political considerations, correct?
Yes.
And you noted in your opening statement you're here fulfilling a statutory responsibility and that your testimony, quote, represents the IC's assessment of threats,
That's right.
Correct? That opening statement, as submitted to the committee in advance of this hearing, stated that as a result of last summer's airstrikes, quote, Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated, end quote, correct?
That's right.
And is that in fact the assessment of the intelligence community?
Yes.
So the assessment of the intelligence community is that Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated by last summer's airstrikes?
Yes.
This is brilliant.
And the opening statement you submitted to the committee last night also stated, quote, there has been no effort since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability, end quote, correct?
That's right.
And that's the assessment of the intelligence community.
Yes.
The White House stated on March 1st of this year that this war was launched and was, quote, a military campaign to eliminate the imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime, end quote. That's a statement from the White House. Quote, the imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime. Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was an imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime?
The intelligence community assessed that Iran maintained the intention to rebuild and to continue to grow their nuclear enrichment capability.
Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime, yes or no?
Senator, the only person who can determine what is and is not an imminent threat is the president.
False.
And
This
he
is the
made that
worldwide. This is the
determination.
worldwide threats hearing where you present to Congress national intelligence, timely, objective, and independent of political considerations. You've stated today that the intelligence community's assessment is that Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated, and that, quote, there had been no efforts since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability.
She was once in Congress.
Was it the intelligence community's assessment that nevertheless, despite this obliteration, there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime? Yes or no?
It is not the intelligence community's responsibility to determine what is and is not an imminent threat.
Okay.
That is up to
Here's
the president
the problem.
based on a volume
No,
of
it is
information
precisely
that he receives.
it is precisely your responsibility to determine what constitutes a threat to the United States. This is the worldwide threats hearing.
Hello.
Where, as you noted in your opening testimony, quote, you represent the IC's assessment of threats. You are here to represent the IC's assessment of threats. That's a quote from your own opening statement. And so my question is, as you're here to present the IC's assessment of threats, was it the assessment of the intelligence community that, as the White House claimed on March 1st, there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime? Yes or no?
Once again, Senator,
Not gonna
the
answer.
intelligence community has provided the inputs that make up this annual threat assessment.
You won't answer the
It is
question.
the nature of the imminent threat that the president has to make that determination based on a collection and volume
You're here
of
to be
information and
timely.
intelligence that he is
You're here-
provided with.
You're here to be timely, objective, and independent of political considerations.
Exactly.
That ain't
what I'm
going to
doing.
happen. No.
No, you're evading a question
Yep.
because to provide a candid response to the committee would contradict a statement from the White House. Let me ask you about your presence in Fulton County on January 28th of this year.
Yeah, about that.
You were present at the FBI's raid on the Fulton County Elections Office on January 28th, correct?
I was present for part of the FBI exercising a warrant approved by a municipal judge.
Yes,
to
and the
obtain
FBI was there executing
investigation.
that warrant to seize ballots and materials associated with the 2020 election, correct?
Yes.
And are you aware that members of this committee have already opened inquiries into your election-related activities?
Yes.
And are you aware that your general counsel and deputy general counsel have already provided testimony to this committee regarding those activities?
Yes.
On February 2nd, you sent a letter to Senator Warner regarding your presence at the raid. Was that letter accurate?
I don't recall the exact date, but if I sent a letter that had my signature, it was accurate.
You stated in the letter that your presence at the raid was, quote, requested by the president, correct?
Yes.
When did the president request your presence at the raid?
The day of the raid, the warrant execution commencing.
Just happy to be free that day.
The day of the raid.
Yes.
He called you on the phone?
Wow.
I'm not going to disclose how the message was delivered, but it was a request from the president and his administration to go and help oversee this warrant being executed, along with the deputy director of the FBI.
Is it your
and
role to
thank
oversee-
the FBI agents who were conducting
Is it
this
your
warrant.
role to oversee the execution of criminal warrants?
It is my role, based on statute that Congress has passed, to have oversight over election security, to include counterintelligence.
But you said
to
you
include
oversaw the raid, correct? You just testified you oversaw the raid?
portions of it.
Okay. Did you handle any ballots or election-related materials?
No.
You were inside an FBI evidence truck, correct? You were photographed inside an FBI evidence
It was an
truck.
empty truck, yes.
The president stated, quote, you looked at
Senator's time has
votes that
expired.
wanted to be checked out.
The
Is that
senator's
accurate?
time is expired.
Did you look at votes as the president
Senator
stated?
Ossoff, your time has expired.
You respond
can
for the
have
record?
her. No, she cannot respond
No,
because
for the record, will the director please respond for the record to that question is my
I'm happy to respond to questions for the record.
Well, that was tense. We'll discuss further when the Rancho returns. It's George Now, Progressive Voice via TuneIn. A reminder now that John Ossoff, representing Georgia voters, Fulton County voters, has been openly questioning Tulsi Gabbard's presence at the FBI Fulton County ballot raid from the moment it happened.
I just want to note for the committee that my constituents in Georgia, and I think much of the American public, are quite reasonably alarmed and asking questions after the Director of National Intelligence was spotted bizarrely and personally lurking in an FBI evidence truck in Fulton County, Georgia, yesterday. So I encourage all of us on a bipartisan basis to pursue the facts as swiftly as possible to understand whether the Office of the Director of National Intelligence is straying far outside of its lane.
By the way, you want to have some fun on YouTube? Go back to Tulsi Gabbard's. She still has a YouTube page, and she hasn't taken any of these videos down from when she was running for president in 2020. The cell phones are just apparent. First of all, when it comes to stealing your privacy and data, et cetera, and so on, which she was right there to witness happening, this was Tulsi Gabbard in 2020.
We must stand up against the big Wall Street banks who gamble with our money and our future. Stand up against overreaching intelligence agencies and big tech companies who take away our civil liberties, privacy, and freedoms in the name of national security and corporate greed.
Fascinating. When it comes to the war, however, these three are gems. Take a listen.
Now, President Trump campaigned against regime change wars when he ran for president. But now he bows to the wishes of the neocons who surround him, clamoring for regime change wars that he claimed to oppose, this time in Venezuela and in Iran.
This was in 2020, y'all, not recently.
These powerful politicians dishonor the sacrifices made by every one of my brothers and sisters in uniform, their families, as they are the ones who pay the price for these wars. In fact, every American pays the price for these wars that have cost us trillions of dollars since 9/11. Every dollar that we spend on regime change wars or on the new Cold War and this nuclear arms race is a dollar coming out of our pockets. Dollars that should be used to address the very real urgent needs of our people and our communities right here at home.
As the pitchman says on cable television, but wait, there's more.
We must stand up against this administration that claims to believe in America first, but who sells our troops, our weapons, and our interests to whichever foreign country is the highest bidder. We must stand up against those who dishonor our troops, treating them as political pawns and mercenaries for hire in wars around the world.
You mean like when you use the returning bodies in a casket with a flag draped over them in your campaign lit? Yeah. In fact, I'm Ron, and I approve that message. One more. This again, Tulsi Gabbard 2020.
We must stand united and stand strong against those in both parties who never tire of war. Neocons and neolibs who drag us from one regime change war to the next and who are exacerbating the new Cold War, pushing us to the brink of nuclear war. We deserve better. Our country deserves better.
That was Tulsi Gabbard in 2020. You can't make that stuff up, man. That's Tulsi Gabbard 2020. Going back to John Ossoff with Tulsi Gabbard.
I want to call everyone's attention again to this fundraising email signed by the president that Senator Kelly mentioned earlier, in which the President of the United States invites his campaign donors to, quote, claim your spot, join now to receive private national security briefings to his political donors, featuring a photo of the president at a dignified transfer ceremony with a flag-draped coffin of an American service member killed in action returning to their family. And the American people need to know that the President of the United States is fundraising for his political campaign and his PAC using images of American service members killed in action, and it's a disgrace.
And then Tulsi tap danced around a bunch of questions that were, rather important to answer when it comes to her role, not just in the FBI raid, but in the lead up to the Iran excursion, we're calling it. Not a war, an excursion. Joe Kent, of course, stepped down, lengthy letter on social media explaining why he knew in his heart of heart and as his role in counterterrorism, as the lead aide in the president's counterterrorism task force, that the run-up to the Iran war was not about an imminent threat to national security.
So this is a really big deal and you need to pay attention to it. Tulsi Gabbard, who is the director of national intelligence, had a deputy, the director of national counterterrorism, and his name is Joe Kent. Joe Kent is a retired Green Beret combat veteran, former Republican congressional candidate, and a Gold Star husband whose wife was killed fighting ISIS. He is also a full-on MAGA Trumper, red hat wearing, white nationalist Republican superboy. And he has just resigned from his job in protest of the Iran war. He writes in his resignation letter to the president, "After much reflection, I have decided to resign from my position as director of the National Counterterrorism Center effective today. I cannot, in good conscience, support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby." This is a man that Donald Trump endorsed, embraced, hired for national intelligence senior position, who has insider knowledge of this conflict. And until today, blind loyalty to the administration coming out and saying, this is wrong and I cannot participate. The White House press secretary, Carolyn Leavitt, responded by saying Joe Kent was lying, that this idea that Iran posed no imminent threat was a lie. That the president has explicitly stated he had strong and compelling evidence that Iran was going to attack the United States. It's just that no one has seen it. And here is Joe Kent, director of the National Counterterrorism Center and right-wing zealot saying, no, they didn't. This isn't the Democrats or the left-wing media. This isn't a pro-Iran mouthpiece. This is an absolute MAGA insider. And the fact that he is turning on his own people is so telling. And the more they go after him, the more I hope he will reveal. Now, I'm not here to support Joe Kent. I actively worked against him when he ran for office because he is a white nationalist, far-right, anti-Semitic MAGA creep. But what he has done here is brave. This is a man who knows where the bodies are buried, and he is coming out against his own party on behalf of our country. And I can only hope that more people will follow his lead.
That's a politics girl, a.k.a. Lee McGowan. Going into the Joe Kent situation. By the way, there have been new allegations about Joe Kent and leaking classified documents. Does that sound familiar? So that campaign to smear this guy, and I don't know the relevancy of it. I don't know the legitimacy of this, but according to the Associated Press, the FBI is now investigating whether or not the departed counterterrorism official leaked classified info. And the word is that investigation began before he left. We'll see about that. Reporting by the AP's Eric Tucker, FBI investigating whether Joe Kent, who resigned his position as top counterterrorism official this week in protest of the Iran war, improperly shared classified information. A person familiar with the matter said Wednesday. The investigation precedes Kent's resignation Tuesday from his role as director of the U.S. government's National Counterterrorism Center, said the person who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss an ongoing FBI inquiry. But it comes as the Justice Department has undertaken multiple investigations over the last year into political foes of President Donald Trump, including former FBI Director James Comey, New York Attorney General Letitia James. Prosecutors have repeatedly struggled to make charges stick amid rejections from judges or to secure indictments in the first place. The timing, I'm saying here, is notable. I see my time is up. I want to thank you so much for listening. We do this weekdays, 8 a.m. to 10 on Georgia Now. The rerun, 4 to 6 p.m. on Georgia Now as well. 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn. Or if you listen via podcast, well, thanks for finding us wherever you podcast. Tell your friends about us. Show notes, as always, at ronshowatl.com. We'll catch you tomorrow.